Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul. And this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome Judi Cohen, known in the cruise community as Traveling Judi. I feature Traveling Judi in my second cruise book, Cruising Interrupted, in a section called Cruises Like You and Me, Sorta. Traveling Judi is a fervent world cruiser with a penchant for smaller and even tiny ships relative to mainstream cruise ships. Judi is also a travel writer extraordinaire. In fact, I met her through my association with Quirky Cruise online magazine, for whom she is a significant contributor. From the travelingjudi.com website, Judi has traveled the world in search of unique experiences and off-the-beaten-path destinations. She is a connoisseur of small ship cruises that pack big adventure and local cultural and dining experiences. Judi became a full-time traveler and travel advisor in 2015 following her 35-year career in engineering and transportation. And today, she writes about her experiences to inspire others to step outside their comfort zones and embrace new kinds of adventure. Judi has been to over 90 countries on 6 continents and enjoys sharing her stories along the way. Her training and experience as a health coach and as a travel advisor allows her to plan trips and seek out wellness destinations and experiences. Combined with her storytelling skills, she has become an accomplished travel writer, accredited by SATW, NATJA, and IFWTWA, and her work has been published on travel websites such as quirkycruise.com. She is also a board member on the Travel Media Association of Canada's National Board as board secretary. It was fun interviewing Judi for Cruising Interrupted. A couple of anecdotes sticks in my mind. One was from Judi's recollection of her expedition cruise to Antarctica. She said, "One of the most memorable, maybe not in a good way, was crossing the Drake Passage. It was rough, it was crazy, and my husband gets seasick in a bathtub." Judi laughed. The other was asking Judi about her bucket list. As you know, I ask all interviewees about what's on their bucket list. Judi's response was a colorful and hilarious one, and unfortunately, I can't repeat it on the podcast. What I can quote is, Judi said, "I liken bucket lists to before I die. For me, I am much more forward-thinking than that. I want to do these things while I am healthy, while I can, and while I am still interested. I don't know, talking about what I'm going to do before I die just has a negative connotation. I'm more about turning my dreams into memories every day." Welcome, Judi, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Thanks, Paul. It's nice to be speaking with you.
So how you doing? How's your family?
Oh, you know what? Family is just great. Our family has grown. We now have 2 grandsons and a granddaughter on the way in less than a month in New York City. And on the other end of the scale, we've lost both of our mothers since we spoke last in 2022 and 2023.
Very, very sorry to hear that. On the positive side, I mean, as a grandparent, you are going to absolutely love it. But you've already started experiencing it, so
yeah, that's great.
I'm now addicted. I'm addicted to being a grandparent as I am to cruising. So.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a good balance.
Yep. And this holiday, I actually get to cruise and be with my grandparents at the same my grandkids at the same time. So. Where
are you going? What are you doing?
It's just a Christmas cruise it's on MSC. It's not a real great itinerary. It's just to their private island in the Bahamas and then to Nassau, which, I've been to a zillion times. And actually, believe it or not, it stops in Florida on Christmas Day. It leaves out of New York, and it stops in Port Canaveral on Christmas Day of all days. So,
Right.
so
Right.
before,
That sounds good though. Nice
yep,
way to
yep,
go.
yep. Before we discuss Traveling Judi, fill our listeners in on some personal details. Tell our listeners where you're from, where you live, a professional background, anything you would like to share, Judi.
All right. So I live in Toronto, Canada, and that's where I was from. I was born there. I was raised there, and that's where I live right now. And after retiring from a 35-year career in engineering and construction, I believe that that's when I found my groove with travel writing and just being a world traveler. So it's been a very enriching life, particularly since I left my professional career.
In the intro, I alluded to your penchant for smaller and even tiny ships relative to mainstream cruise ships. And out of the way adventures. You regaled me with stories in Cruising Interrupted. Talk about that.
Well, I am very fond of small ships, as you mentioned, particularly those in off the beaten path destinations in parts of the world that are really intriguing and enjoyable. I've done everything from tiny luxury houseboat in Canada, and they also operate in France. I'm going to be doing one of those, to 8-passenger barges in Europe, to smaller expedition ships between 16 and 40 passengers. And I've done those in Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, India, Alaska, Canada, and most recently I've done small ship expeditions in the Arctic, the Canadian Arctic, in Greenland, and in Antarctica. So it's just been a world of discovery on tiny ships. I have also done a number of mainstream cruise ships, and I would do them. I would probably go back, and as my life continues to evolve, as yours has, there will be a time that I will want to take my family, multi-gen family, on one of the larger cruise ships that has got all kinds of wonderful attractions and things to do for everybody of all ages.
Sure. I recall in our interviews and Cruising Interrupted, you do a lot of things in India.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
So I've traveled to India, I think it's 5 times now. Most of the times those trips are by land, but I did a cruise on the Brahmaputra River, which is in the in northeast India, near the Himalayas, and that is very remote and very interesting. And there's a number of cruise lines that are operating that now. I did it at that time on a line on a ship called the MV Mahabahu. You got that, Paul? Mahabahu.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure. Just don't ask me to repeat it.
Exactly. So, and the Mahabahu, we took our family with us. Our children didn't have children yet, but our children came with us, and some friends came with us on that trip. Without exception, everybody loved that and would go back and do it again tomorrow. And I've just noticed that Panda Cruises is operating now on the Mahabahu, and I may just have to go back another time to India to do that. I love India because it is a country of opposites, abject poverty and obscene wealth, somehow living side by side. And it's the complexity there of society. And you either love India or you hate it. So there's nothing in between. And I'm on the part of, I love India and I accept it for what it is. One thing that I have heard from travelers is that they go and they get upset and they'd like to change things and they're questioning why are things the way they are. And my answer is, you have to go and you've got to immerse yourself there, enjoy it, learn from it all, but don't try to change it. Don't try to impose your culture or standards or anything else. on a society that has lived this way.
Yeah, that's a similar lesson to what I get from. I have a daughter who is in love with India. She's been a couple of times. She attended a wedding in India, and I talk with amazement to her about India and the contrast that you just mentioned, the abject poverty and the unbelievable wealth, and she kind of responds like you're doing right now. Don't try to change it. Just live with it and appreciate it for its amazing attributes. So.
Yep. Yeah. And that's true in many other places too. That's
Sure.
true in a lot of other countries. And to be a traveler, you just need to see things the way they are and try to be as conscious of that as you can be.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to tread on their territory or make them be any different or work at changing them.
Mm-hmm. You are always cruising. I should say always traveling. And I know from Facebook you've gone on some amazing journeys recently. But the one that really captivated me, it's firmly on my bucket list, although I don't know when I'll check this off, was a land trip you took to Japan. That sounds amazing. Tell us about it.
So I had the luxury of spending 3 weeks in Japan just last month, and it was our 10th trip to Japan.
Oh wow! I didn't realize that you'd been that many times.
Yes, it happens to be my husband's favorite place on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've gone.
You mean it's not Drake's Passage?
Definitely not. One thing we don't have to worry about in Japan is seasickness. But this time we took a trip and we were on in Okinawa, which is one of the world's blue zones, where longevity is a real thing. There are more people that live to be over 100 there than anywhere else in the world.
Wow. So let me back you up. Educate me. Blue zone, I guess you kind of just defined it, right?
Yeah.
Say some more. I never heard that phrase. I heard of places that kind of draw the attention of scientists for that reason that you explained, but I never heard it called the blue zone.
Yeah, so these places are called the blue zone. I think there's about 6 of them in the world. Japan is one of the very significant ones, and Okinawa is the blue zone within Japan. And for whatever reason, people have been studying these blue zones to understand what the ingredients are. What are the secret ingredients to living to 100? And I went there, and certainly, I have discovered that it isn't just about food, but it is about food. It is about what you eat. It's about your lifestyle. It's about finding meaning and working, and contributing to society. And it's about communal living. Okay, and they support one another. And it was interesting that the resorts that we stayed at, we saw people that were women. Most of them are women. Okay, who live to 100, but men do too. But the women were wearing these big hats and they were doing the gardening and they were completely functional. They were bending down and they were picking things up and they were carrying things and carrying all the tools. And there were 100-year-old women working in restaurants.
Wow.
So they continue to have purpose and they're eating. One other thing that we discovered is that you never eat until you're full. Like we have a tendency in North America to sit down and eat until we cannot move anymore, right? Our stomach just hurts us. But
especially on cruise ships.
Especially on cruise ships. But in Okinawa, everything is small. Like breakfast can be 20 small plates, most of them plant-based, okay, or fish. Very little meat. Meat you order by the gram. So it's probably a 2x2 square of Kobe beef or Wagyu beef, or in the case of Okinawa, it was Miyako beef, and they're very fatty. So they're not afraid to eat fat there, but they eat it in moderation. So, and you start your morning with a salad. Every day starts with salads and green things and your drinks, and they drink green teas and all kinds of teas that were recommended to me. And they walk and they walk and they walk. They don't exercise in the way we think of exercise. You know, like we kind of add it on and say, oh, I have to get to the gym. But for them, it seems to be incorporated into their way of life. And a lot of the blue zones in the world have elevation. So they're walking uphill and downhill all the time. And it's integrated into their day.
Now, let me ask you, Judi, this is kind of a aside. I would think that at least some contingent of Americans and Europeans, or people from other parts of the world, would be fascinated by blue zones and even attempt to immigrate there. Are there laws against that, or is that frowned upon? Is that easy to do?
I can't answer that from an immigration perspective. But what I can tell you is that we were the only two Caucasians that I saw at a number of these resorts. And everything is in Japanese. They cater to everything on Miyako-jima Island, which is where we spent a lot of our time, caters to Japanese. It's a Japanese resort area. I don't know about immigration. I'm not sure how that would work. But there are blue zones. There's some in California also. I don't
really
know. Oh, yes, but there are blue zones in Italy, in Sardinia, on Sicily, and I think there's 2 in the States. So if you want to actually just learn about them, or you want to go and understand what makes all of those people tick in those communities, in those zones, you can visit these places. You don't have to go to Japan to live that lifestyle, but basically it's moderation. So, you basically eat to 80%. You don't eat more than that. You don't wait until you're full. You basically taste things, enjoy them, savor them, kind of slow eating. Cruising, it's called slow eating.
Do they eat desserts?
Yes, they eat desserts. A lot of them are soya-based. Yeah, there's very nice desserts that they have. There's a lot of jellies and soy-based desserts, green tea, puddings, and different desserts. But it's not mountains of, I didn't actually see, now that you ask me, I didn't see cakes. I didn't see anything like we pile on here, but they do have ices and ice cream. It's made with local ingredients, and they eat a lot of nuts and a lot of berries.
I eat a lot of nuts. My problem is I drink beer along with it.
They drink beer there too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, what else were highlights of Japan? We could probably spend a whole podcast talking about Japan.
One of the places, first of all, I'm going to tell you this right off the top, Paul. I would like to go back to Japan. I would like to go back on a cruise ship, possibly on one of the celebrity ships that circumnavigates Japan. And I would like to go back there and stop and see the reaction of a lot of the cruise guests on how they're appreciating it. And it's a little bit different when you spend a day in a port or 2 days in a port.
Right.
But one of the ports, we visited the port city we visited Tokyo. Then they bring lots of tourists into Kyoto. And we went to Kobe. So there's a lovely port and seaport in Kobe. And we saw some ships there when we were in, but they have to be smaller ones. They're not the big, gigantic cruise ships, the mega ships. They're smaller ones. It's fascinating. Like, we loved Kobe. We loved the whole experience, the teppanyaki experience, where they cook over flames for you and they show you all of your ingredients and you interact with the chef. as he's preparing your meal. And he waits and he looks you in the eye and he waits to see how delighted you are with what he's created. So it's like a song, that you're creating together. As you watch, and they use this salt. It's called snow salt, and they sprinkle this snow salt on everything that they prepare, and they're very generous with it. Like they pick it up out of a container and just.
Now, are you saying snow salt or no salt?
Oh, snow. It's called snow.
Oh, okay, okay.
Miyakojima. We brought some snow salt back with us, and we're cooking with it now.
Okay.
But it would be really interesting to go back on a cruise ship and stop at a number of these ports. And if I could find one that went to Okinawa, to some of those islands that I visited, one of the islands, I'm just going to tell you this, that we loved was Yakushima. And it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The center of the island is all old cedar trees that are thousands of years old. They've named the trees within these forests, cedar forests, and it's remarkable. It's all moss, and they used to use cedar. Well, they still do, but a lot of these cedar trees were slaughtered, they say, to make shingles for houses, and they would only use certain parts of them, and then they just threw them back into the forest. So what you see in the middle of Yakushima is this whole forest area, miles and miles and miles and miles of it. And it's parts of trees that haven't been used. And then they've left a whole bunch of these beautiful giants. And you can hike through there. So we spent a day hiking through there and doing the trails. And the resorts that was there were beautiful. I mean, we stayed in gorgeous resorts. And then again, we took a public bus to get out into the forest, spent our day there, wandering through the beautiful cedar woods, and then came back to our luxury oasis, right? An eco resort on the island. So there's just so many things that you can do.
Japan is entrenched on my bucket list, but I think it's just moved up. Talk about your latest cruise.
My latest cruise, I did 2 Arctic expedition. One that was with Quirky Expeditions, and we went only to the Canadian Arctic, and that was fabulous. Quirky Expeditions, I went on the Ultramarine, which is their newest ship, luxury ship, and they carry 2 helicopters. So not only do you get to go out on the expeditions. Have you done expeditions, Paul?
No, that's a hole in my cruising portfolio.
Okay. So expedition ships are small. They carry typically, the ones that I like carry under 100 guests or maybe just over, so that you can do everything to the max while you're on board. They are very adventurous. They go to adventurous destinations. And a lot of your time is spent, most of your time is actually spent off of the ship on Zodiacs, going into places that larger ships could never get into. And you explore on the land. So there's a lot of landings as well. I always wanted to go up to the Canadian Arctic. I wanted to follow the Franklin expedition along the Northwest Passage. Weather precluded us from doing part of that trip. So our trip we were delayed for 3 days in Calgary because of wildfires that were happening in Yellowknife in Canada at the time. And the charter flights were all diverted to work with rescue. So we were on standby, and then we finally got up there and were flown to a different city than we were planning to go to. And so our routing was all changed, and it didn't really matter. Like, to me, it didn't matter. It was all part of the adventure. But we ended up we were in Nunavut, and we ended up in Resolute. And my takeaway from all of that is a really harsh environment.
It would seem that passengers on expedition ships would, by definition, have to be fit.
Well, I actually wrote about that because there are some very good expedition ships and cruise lines that cater to people with mobility challenges.
Oh, really?
Yes. So a lot of them cater to that. And I'm not a spring chicken anymore. You know that, Paul. And despite that, I'm able to embark on the ship. I'm able to disembark onto the Zodiacs, get off of the Zodiacs and onto land with assistance from the crew. And the staff and the crew on these expedition ships are amazing. They're there. They will help. They will also tell you if they think one of these excursions is beyond your capability, and they offer different levels. So when they take you to land, you can do the extreme hikes, or you can do the bunny hop.
Okay.
So it's good.
So with such a small passenger load, say a little bit about the amenities and accommodations of these expedition ships.
Well, they vary. I mean, the expedition ships can vary in terms of accommodations. I've been on, what I will call as hardcore expedition ships, retired scientific vessels. One was a Russian vessel. It's been retired. It was the
was that the Vavilov?
Yes, it was the Vavilov, the academic Sergei Vavilov, and I enjoyed every minute of that. But it was pretty hardcore. The rooms were very basic as compared to Adventure Canada. Had a very nice ship. We did the Arctic. I did the Arctic twice this summer, by the way, on Cork Expeditions, which was a luxurious ship with gorgeous accommodations and balconies and beautiful dining rooms and all kinds of amenities. Whereas Adventure Canada was a hardcore adventure, and it was very much community building. So they had Inuit guides and staff on board the ship. And they had bear guards who were trained in Inuit communities to guard us against polar bears, as we got beyond the Arctic Circle. Different experiences. But the Ocean Endeavour with Adventure Canada was a much more basic ship. Was it amazing? Absolutely.
I assume, I trust that on both of these, Lawrence went?
No, Lawrence did not come with me on either of those.
Oh, okay. Because I was talking about in the introduction, one of your funniest lines from Cruising Interrupted was talking about Drake's Passage. I think you said it was rough. I can't remember, but I know it finished with, and my husband gets sick in a bathtub.
Exactly. He definitely gets seasick in a bathtub. And he did not come on either of these. I think at this point he's sorry that he didn't. And if I had the opportunity, I would go back and I would definitely take him to see the Arctic, because it is a beautiful part of this world. And Greenland was unbelievable. I mean, the communities there. We went to Ilulissat in Greenland. And that is the birthplace of all of the icebergs in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the iceberg factory. And all those magnificent icebergs you see originate in Ilulissat, in the iceberg.
I got some great photos from you of icebergs, that a lot of the listeners have seen, because I've been using it to promote this episode. Let's go way back to the beginning. Talk about your first cruise.
Our first cruise we did with Lawrence was our honeymoon. Long time ago. I'm not going to tell you how many years that was, but a long time ago. And we did it on Chandris Cruises. Do you remember the Chandris Cruise Line?
Yep. I know they are a celebrity now.
So we did Chandris Cruise Lines, and we really wanted to do the Mediterranean and had a great itinerary. Went into Turkey and Egypt and Israel. It was a fantastic itinerary. There was only one hitch. We could only afford to have a cabin with bunk beds.
Now, let me tell the listeners. Maybe you mentioned it, but Judi and Lawrence were in bunk beds, but they were on their honeymoon.
That's right. We were on our honeymoon. So, given that we've been together for a long, long time now, and it hasn't hurt us to do our honeymoon in bunk beds.
There you did. That was a great, maybe symbolic start.
Yes. And that really was the start of all of it. And then we did a series of other cruises with friends, the party ships. We did a lot of the party ships. We took groups, 10 or 12 of us or 14 of us would go on all kinds of cruises, and we had a ball. We had an absolute ball until I suddenly discovered Panda cruises in Asia and in Myanmar, actually. And I went back 3 times on that and then got hooked on the Panda cruises, tiny little expedition ships, teak boats that operate in Cambodia. And we recently did Laos earlier this year. At New Year's, we were on the ship. We were on the Panda Champa in Laos on the upper Mekong, which was just delightful.
So, going back to the big cruise or that first cruise, it's fair to say that your initial impressions were positive because you kept cruising. You developed your affinity for adventure and small ship cruising. Is that when your travel writing career started also?
My travel writing career started when I left the engineering area.
Okay.
I left in around 2013, 2014, and I was trained as a luxury travel concierge. And I went to work putting together trips for people all around the world. And I actually learned the business.
Didn't at one time you had an assignment of putting together African safaris?
Yes, that was with when I was with one of the agencies. One of the specialties there was safaris. African safaris. So I did spend quite a bit of my time learning about Africa and learning about the safari. And now I see that a number of cruise lines actually are operating amazing. The large cruise ships are operating some pretty amazing African itineraries down the west coast and up the east coast of Africa.
Africa is also on my bucket list, but I want to do a cruise, but I also want to do a safari. So yeah. I got to figure out how to swing, how to do both.
I mean, I think the best way to do it is find a cruise that starts in Johannesburg or in Cape Town, and then give yourself time afterwards or before to do a safari, because you can fly from Joburg up to Cape Town. You can fly up to Kruger National Park or Botswana. You can go to different places and do a couple of different safari experiences, and you should. If you're going to go all that way, you should.
Yep. So regale us with some small ship cruising highlights, some that you recall greatly.
I loved doing all the small ships that I did during COVID, during the lockdown. I did 3 Canadian small ship cruises. The first one I did was with Le Boat on the Rideau Canal. Le Boat operates luxury houseboats in various parts of the world. They have, at the time that I did it, they had over 650 houseboats.
Educate me. What's the difference between a houseboat and barge cruising?
A houseboat, in this particular case with Le Boat, you captain your own boat. So when you arrive there, we don't have boating licenses. We never had any boating experience. We arrived there and they gave us about 2 hours of training, safety training and operational training. And then they send you out and away you go. And you learn to maneuver through the locks and get into the various ports on the way.
Get out. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. And so, and the reason that they can do it without requiring a license is that the speed is moderated. I think it goes at 10 knots. So it's really slow cruising. But the houseboat was wonderful. We did that with our family. And during COVID, we couldn't do anything else. We wouldn't go anywhere else with anybody. So we took our family unit, and they also allow pets. So we were able to take our family dog.
Hmm. But now this wasn't it. It wasn't overnight, right? It was just.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, wow.
We did 4 nights, but you can do 3 nights, 4 nights, 5 nights, 7 nights on the houseboat. And again, I would like to go back and do that. But we did the houseboat with LeBoat, and then I did another trip with Ontario Waterways, small cruise line in Ontario, which is where I live, and they do the Rideau Canal, but they do it all the way from Kingston to Ottawa. So we went through 44 locks on this ship, and I loved that, and I wrote about that. And then I did another one with St. Lawrence Cruise Lines along the St. Lawrence River in Canada. There you go through, I don't know if you ever heard of the Thousand Islands, and a number of beautiful places where the ship actually takes you in and out of the States and back. It doesn't let you off the ship, but you're actually cruising through along the border. So times you're in the United States and times you're in Canada, and the magnificent cottages that you see they've all got their flagpoles, and one side is all American and one side is all Canadian. But it was very cool. So I love the Canadian. Then I also did a Viking cruise line expedition ship, again, along the Great Lakes. I did that from Milwaukee all the way up to Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is in northern Ontario in Canada. And that was pretty marvelous. And the Viking ship is a little bit bigger. It's almost 400 people. But that, again, it had a submarine on it. It had 2 submarines, carried 2 yellow submarines. The one that we rode in was called John. And we were taken to the bottom of the lake. It was probably the first time that anyone's seen the bottom of some of those Great Lakes. And
Wow.
It was great. I mean, it was a little stressful at first. The Viking really prepares you. There's a safety meeting, and it basically scares off half of the passengers from everyone because they give you all of the reasons why, right? You might not want to do this. Like if you are claustrophobic, the submarine only carries 6 people, including the pilot. And so you wouldn't want to be there if you're claustrophobic. You have to physically, you mentioned this before, Paul, but you have to physically be able to move from the Zodiac onto the submarine platform and down a set of steps on a ladder into a very small space and sit down in this little seat. And you have to take enough medicine. If you're on medication, they suggest you take at least 3 days of medication with you in case something happens.
That sounds kind of ominous.
Yeah.
Many of these took place, you said, during the pandemic.
Yes.
So I actually interviewed you for Cruising Interrupted during the cruising shutdown. How did it end for Canada, and when did it end? Well, better yet, what was your first cruise back?
Well, it was the Canadian ones, and then I did Viking, Octantis, the new Viking expedition from Barbados up to New York City. So that was probably the first one that I did right after.
That sounds like an amazing journey, a Viking cruise, New York.
Yeah, that was really amazing. I did that with my daughter, and she fell in love with it, with the islands there. I mean, they did at some incredible stops, ports along the way that were pretty fabulous. And then I basically not really stopped since the pandemic.
So let's chat a little about the future. What do you have booked?
I've got this stage, because we've got another grandchild coming, and because I don't know what all the situation is going to be and how much help they're going to need, I have kept myself pretty free.
Sure.
I have confirmed a river cruise, which I'm very excited about, from Bucharest to Budapest, visiting 5 countries along the way. And that's on the Danube with Viking. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And that is booked for July for this summer. I'm still waiting to see if we can squeeze in an Antarctic cruise, yet another Antarctic cruise. But this one, we would fly. We would do a fly cruise. So we would fly from Toronto to Chile. From Punta Arenas, we would fly on a charter flight to Antarctica directly. So rather than sailing for 2 days and getting seasick in the Drake, we would fly 2 hours. That is one of the things I'm hoping to still do this winter season. Like it's the summer season in Antarctica. So I'd like to do that before March if I could squeeze that in. I'm also hoping to do a riverside cruises in Europe, another river cruise, and get on the Emerald Sakura. Have you heard of the Emerald ships, some of the new yachts, the luxury yachts?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to do that. And European waterways, I will do another barge cruise. The last one I did was in France on the Canal du Midi on a barge with 8 people. And you asked the difference, by the way, and barge has a captain. So the barges are captained and there is a small crew and you have your own chef on board who prepares the meals for all of the people.
So going back to the houseboat, did you cook your own food?
Yes, we did. We took coolers. We took all of our everything we needed because it was COVID and we didn't want to have to go into stores or, expose ourselves to any people along the way. We took coolers, we took meat, we took all of our own food and we prepared our food on the houseboat. There's a barbecue on the top deck and it was like a hot plate and we could prepare all of our meals. And the kitchen is nicer than the one I have at home. It wasn't a difficulty.
Okay.
It was actually very nice and it allowed us to be isolated.
Well, a barge cruise is definitely on my bucket list. Houseboat, I'm just learning about a houseboat, so I'll have to do some research. Didn't you say you wrote about your adventure? Can you tell the listeners how we can read that?
Yeah, you can find it. Everything that I write about is on my website.
Okay.
www.travelingjudi.com.
You'll be proud to know that I am booked for my first river cruise from talking to experts like you, but I get around to checking them off. So I'll get on a barge cruise eventually. But yeah, this river cruise is nice. 7 days in France and then a 3-day land trip in Paris. So that's in August. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Who are you doing that with?
Amma Waterways.
Oh, that'll be beautiful.
The Amma Christina,
that'll be lovely.
So let me recall your words from Cruising Interrupted. What dreams are you looking to turn into memories?
Right. So I still have got a few things that I need to do. And one of them is, a number of these could be land trips and they could be by boat, except for Bhutan. I would like to get to Bhutan.
No, I never heard of that. Say some more.
Bhutan, you could fly to India and then move into Bhutan. It's the kingdom of happiness. And there's mountains and monasteries. So it's a bit off the beaten track. Okay, I'm not surprised you haven't heard of it. But so I would like to get to Bhutan, but that's going to be a land trip and everything there. You have to have all of your transportation and everything else done by the hotels. So it's quite organized. So Bhutan is one. Believe it or not, Paul, I've never been to Australia or New Zealand. And those are 2 places I would like to get to. And I'd like to get to Singapore. My husband has been to Singapore, but I haven't been there. And I know Heidi used to live there from Quirky Cruise.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, she doesn't live there anymore. I always wanted to get there while she was still there. So those really are the highlights of places. I'd like to do the South Pacific, more of the South Pacific. I've done Tahiti and the Tuamotu Islands in French Polynesia. That was another thing I did right after. Let me go back just another bit. Right after the pandemic was just breaking and my mom had passed away in January of 2022. That's when I really started doing a lot of travel. I went with the Viking to and did the trip from Barbados up to New York City. I went to Tahiti And Lawrence and I went there, and he got COVID, believe it or not, on Tahiti, and was not well enough to get on the cruise.
Oh, wow.
When he was well enough, he flew home. The same day he flew back to Canada, I boarded the Windstar, Wind Spirit. It was a small sailing yacht. It was the most romantic ship that I had ever been on and could ever have imagined. I think I was the only solo person on that cruise. And I worried about it. You know, like one of the most memorable things that I had is getting on to this romantic cruise ship with all couples and beautiful dining rooms and experiences and snorkeling. And it was fabulous. And one of the staff came to me. Her name was Teresa. She said, "You don't have to worry." She says, "Don't worry about a thing. Have dinner with me." She goes, "I've booked dinner and you'll have dinner with me." She says, "I make you a promise. You will never be alone on this cruise."
Oh, wow.
I never was alone, and I enjoyed every moment of that. But I had such anxiety as I was boarding. And when I went into the dining room the first night, they sat me at a round table at the front of the dining room. And as I walked in and sat down by myself, it was as if all eyes were on me. And they were trying to figure out, why is she by herself? You know, is she divorced? Is she a horrible person? I had all these thoughts going through my brain, but I still enjoyed my dinner. But after that, it was smooth sailing. And I had a great time. And I was included in dinner tables and, as we planned our excursions and going places, I was part of a much larger group, and it turned out to be a fabulous experience.
What are you working on at Traveling Judi? Any articles, upcoming articles we should look out for?
Yeah, I've got a few articles that are coming out still on. I've had several published on Quirk expeditions, my Arctic experience, high Arctic experience, a dining experience that you can only have on Quirk's ship. It's called Tundra at a Table.
I hope that we get you some visitors to your site, because they all sound like your articles sound like things that I suspect many would like to read about, even if they don't necessarily foresee themselves doing that. You just introduced me to a whole new world of the houseboat. That's amazing to me that they entrust, what's the right word, civilians with a vessel like that. I just never heard of anything like that.
Well, and Paul, the second time, I not only did the La Boat once, I did it twice. And we went back with our daughter and her fiance and the dog again. And on that trip, which I wrote about also, okay, it's on my website, and I wrote about it for Quirky Cruise, was about running the ship onto a shoal. We actually ran aground.
Oh, wow.
And we had to be towed off. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Come out and do a rescue and tow us off of this shoal. The boat was fine. We didn't do any damage to the boat. But in truth, they're handing you a $750,000 luxury houseboat and hoping that everything will be fine. You have to take insurance. That's what insurance is for. But we were responsible, for paying for the tow. It was on a long weekend, and it cost us $500 or $600 just to have another boat come out and pull us off of the shoal and back into the water. So things do happen.
And then you just continue after you got off the show. You just continued with your journey. I would think things like that happen quite often. With people who are novices piloting the vessel.
Yeah. Well, they don't advertise that. They don't.
No, of course not.
And that's why I decided to write about it, to say the best laid plans, right? And these things, do happen. They do happen. We were very fortunate that nobody was hurt, and the boat was fine. So, and would I do it again? Yes, of course I would do it again. I called it a staycation for me because it was, a 2-hour drive from home. But it's a perfect kind of staycation, and vacation that keeps you away from everybody else, unless you choose to. At that time, there were no restaurants open, Nothing was open. So we did have to prepare all of our meals by ourselves.
Well, Judi, before we let you go, a couple of light cruise questions, maybe even fun cruise questions, and then perhaps an oddball question. So the first is an easy one. I use this to get ideas when I'm on my various cruises, although they're not like your cruises. What's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
I love an Aperol Spritz. I love the color of it. I love the taste of it. It's cool and it's wonderful.
What about food?
Oh, you're going to laugh. I love ice cream. I'm totally drawn to ice cream. Is that food? Is that considered food?
For me and you, yes.
Okay. So I love ice cream in all of its forms. I go to the Sundae bars. I sprinkle everything that they have available. I like.
I suspect in your exotic travel, you've had the opportunity to try some exotic local delicacies, have you?
Yeah, I have.
What's the most I don't know, exotic that you've tried?
Well, the most I'll give you the most recent one on Miyakojima Island. I was at a teppanyaki.
Now, forgive me, I cut geography class that day. Where is that?
Miyakojima is one of the islands off of Japan.
Okay.
And they brought out all of we ordered the set menu. We didn't know what was on it. We asked what they recommend, and they said, we recommend the set menu. We ordered the set menu, and they brought out all of these amazing things. And one of the things was a big shell that had something moving inside of it.
Oh, my goodness.
And he showed it to us. It was just about sick. It to us. I videoed it. I had a little bit of fun. And then he put it on the grill, on the teppanyaki grill. And we watched this thing get cooked from squirming around in its shell to not squirming anymore. Then he scooped it all out, put it back on the grill a little bit, sliced it all out, and he presented it. And my husband and I looked at each other, and I am pretty squeamish, but I tasted it. It was called abalone.
Oh, I've heard of that. Okay.
Yeah. So it was abalone. It was the way it was prepared from live, moving around to being on my plate. I absolutely loved it. Loved it at the end of the day. But we've eaten everything. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. In China, I've had some pretty horrible delicacies. I was early on in China. I was at a table where they serve monkey brains.
I actually have had another guest who I asked this question to those travelers who have a tendency to go to exotic places. I have heard monkey brains before.
Yes, so monkey brains and all kinds of insects.
Yeah, I've heard probably someone from In the Loop Travel, John. He did scorpions on a stick.
So the one rule that I have, unless I know food is very fresh, like in Japan, it's very fresh. Like I ate sushi there without hesitation. Any kind of sushi, I was fine. But in places like India and some of the other off the beaten path areas, my rule is that I will only eat something if it is cooked through, like it has a stew or something that has been cooking for a long period of time.
Okay.
I have less of a possibility of getting sick.
The second light question. So, what's your most memorable, funniest, outlandish, or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
I'm going to stay with my most memorable, because my most memorable really was that Windstar experience that I described to you. So memorable because of the fear that I had, the absolute worry about getting on that ship. Not only was I worried about my husband going back to Canada and hoping that he was going to be fully better from COVID, but going on there by myself, that really concerned me. Having that turn out the way it did made it just absolutely magical. And I was on that on Mother's Day, right after my mother passed away. My mom passed away in January, middle of January. And I was on this cruise ship, and it was my first Mother's Day away.
Okay.
And I had time to walk on the beach and reflect. And lo and behold, I found this beautiful heart in the sand. And I figured, well, she's here with me. Well, that was very memorable. Everything about that trip was very memorable because it was a first. It was my first time being solo on a really exotic, amazing, being away and having Mother's Day without my mother.
So it sounds like you had a fair amount of trepidation getting on, but it turned out to be a very poignant. It was your first Mother's Day without your mom. That's a pretty good story. Thank you. Finally, Judi, you have a large following, and welcome to the Traveling Judi fans and friends listening. We hope you've enjoyed what you have heard on the Joy of Cruising podcast, and will come back for future or even past episodes. Judi, share one thing that my listeners and your fans don't know about Judi.
Oh, you don't know that I suffer from travel anxiety specifically.
Wow, of all people.
And I actually have got an entire manuscript written about anxiety and overcoming anxiety while I travel. I have had moments in Tokyo a long time ago where I couldn't bring myself to getting on the plane to fly to Myanmar. My anxiety kicked in and I was frozen at the airport, and they were announcing our names. Would Judi and Lawrence come to the gate? Judi and Lauren, we're closing the gate. We're doing this, we're doing that. And my husband looked at me and he just said, Jude, you got to pull yourself together here. We're either going to get on this plane and fly to Yangon in Myanmar, or we're going home. He goes, there's nothing in between. We're doing one or the other. The decision is yours. What I will tell you is, if something happens to you in Myanmar, I am going to tell our children that you died doing what you love. I picked up my bag and I got on that plane, and everything was fine.
That's amazing. You deal with anxiety. Could that explain why you do such adventurous traveling? Are you trying to counterback? I don't know what I'm trying to say. It just seems like, I could never do I'm too much of a wimp to do what you do. And you have great anxiety travel.
You know what? I haven't dug deep into it at all, really. All I can do is share my stories of fear and anxiety about various different things, but particularly about traveling. And I always worry that, what happens if something happens to me there? Antarctica, for instance, and the Arctic. And I've often said, doesn't matter what happens to me, just put me out on ice floe, right? The polar bears will be happy in the Arctic, right? It's, I don't know why, but I do love adventure travel, and I hope to do it for many, many more years. As long as I physically can do it, I plan on doing it. And for me, it's really healing. Like I find it great. Every time I do one of these adventures, I come back and say, whoa, can you believe I did that?
Thank you so much for sharing that story about anxiety and adventure travel. I hope that resonated with at least one listener, although I suspect it resonated with many. And I appreciate you sharing that. Judi, it is so good to get to chat with you again. Thank you for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast, and thank you for being a part of Cruising Interrupted, which means we are forever connected.
I just want to say, I hope that our listeners will follow along on my travel on Instagram. I'm a regular poster on Instagram as Traveling Judi, TravelingJudi on Instagram. And then in my stories, and then all my stories appear in my link tree on my Instagram profile and on my website at Traveling Judi as well, travelingjudi.com. So thank you.
Good. So all the best with Traveling Judi, and with your globe-trotting adventures, we sure would love to have you back on. So maybe after you do that cruise to Japan, I won't pick it because you do so many wonderful things. Sometime in 24, we're going to have you back on, Judi, if you will be back.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, Paul, and I love what you do and sharing the way you do in terms of all of the cruising. So it's wonderful. and
Thank
enjoy
you.
your river cruise.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. As they say, we will see you on the ocean.
See you on the ocean.
Take care, Judi.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.